There we go. Hello and welcome to Fuel Poverty Action series of monthly learning sessions, Fuel for Thought, from fuel poverty to climate justice, which is a space to share research and lived experience, tackle lies, and clear up confusion on fuel poverty and climate change, as we ask and answer questions with experts, activists, and campaigners. Today's session is The Truth About Energy Pricing with Jonathan Bean, policy lead on the Energy for All campaign. And in this session, we'll be answering questions including: why did energy prices suddenly go through the roof? Is it really down to the war in Ukraine? Who has collected and got rich off the money from our bills? And why are electricity prices pegged to the price of gas when renewables are up to 9 times cheaper? Hello, Jonathan. Welcome.
So thanks for tuning in tonight. Energy prices have slightly... It's really important that we get it back in the conversation because energy prices are still incredibly high, almost as high as the peak last year. And that's, get us talking about energy pricing again. Some of you probably know loads about a jargon-free version, so it's not going to be like super geeky, but for those that want more detail, very happy to have conversations later, send you more reading, etc., if you want to get more into the detailed stuff. But tonight's going to be kind of a high level thing just to get everyone on the same page and understanding energy pricing, so that you can have good conversations with other people about energy pricing and really kind of spread the word about how unfair it is and put more pressure on government, on Ofgem, etc., to change the energy system. So that's really the purpose of tonight.
Thanks, Jonathan. Energy for All is Fuel Poverty Action's latest campaign to revolutionize energy pricing in the UK, which calls for every household to receive enough energy to cover the basics, paid for by higher tariffs on usage above the basics, such as heated swimming pools, also paid for by windfall taxes on excess fossil fuel profits and ending fossil fuel subsidies. Jonathan, back to you. Why did energy prices suddenly go through the roof?
Well, I think we're all aware that they went super crazy last year, both gas and electricity pricing. It's still really high now, and I think pretty much everyone knows that energy firms made billions in profit. So that's kind of the baseline understanding. What I want to do and why it happened. So, why is this important? It's important because at a basic level, cold homes kill people. So high energy pricing is a major problem. Also causes a lot of debt, which creates a lot of stress in homes, mental health issues. Also, high energy prices drove up food inflation. So the reason people are paying, so it actually fueled inflation for the whole economy. So it's, has huge human impact, and it's also had a really bad economic impact. So this is important stuff to understand and to challenge so that we can improve the situation. So who's to blame for this? Putin is probably the one that's been blamed the most. A lot of people are blaming government, Ofgem, greedy energy firms, or is it interplay between supply and demand? So we're talking now about kind of a bit about that and who really is to blame. So what does the government say? Well, the basic story they're saying is, number one, it's Putin's fault, and also that there are global market forces that we can't really do anything about. It's supply and demand, it's a global market, and there's nothing that the little UK government can do, so it's not their fault, basically. The other thing it says a lot and keeps reminding us of is the fact that it gave 40 billion of help, for which we should apparently be incredibly grateful. And the final thing is it's saying, well, actually the crisis is over now because it's not quite as high as it was last year. So don't worry, we're not going to do anything, nothing to see here. So that's really the message the government's giving. So let's go a little bit deeper. So, I want to talk about three things initially. So why did the prices spike so much? They just seem to spike in an incredible way. Did the government actually really save us, as it keeps telling us? Did it give us its money out of generosity and really help us and save us from these global market forces? And then importantly, where did all this money go? 400 billion. And did all this taxpayer money go? The 40 billion that it keeps telling us it's spent, where did that money actually go, and where did it end up? So let's just go into a little bit of this. So by different people through history, but this idea about not wasting for a part of the total supply, and actually not a big percentage of UK, only 4% in fact. There was a demand increase. There were limited substitutes in that, it's very hard to suddenly switch from using gas at home to something else, and indeed quite expensive. And then also there's the market design. So the way the market's actually designed, which I'll come and talk about a bit, actually made it much easier for gas first, because that was the start. Only 4% of our gas supply, so not a significant part, but it was 40% of the EU's gas supply. So not that important to us, but quite a significant chunk of the EU's gas supply. The other thing to bear in mind is we rely on a lot on gas, despite the fact we're right by the North Sea and obviously had huge control over what happened in the North Sea. We rely actually on Norway, USA, and Qatar for a lot of our gas. So we are actually very vulnerable to needing imports from those countries. So basically, there's a big pipeline from Norway bringing gas to us, and the liquid version of gas, so the LNG, has been imported a lot from the USA and Qatar. Market spike, as you can see on the chart, hopefully. I mean, just crazy. There were fluctuations in previous years, but suddenly we've got these crazy spikes. It's been uncovered quite a lot. I mean, Bloomberg did a really good investigation of this, was looking at energy traders. So actually what happens is, as soon as you get some of these conditions of difficult market conditions, you actually get trading. So companies actually making huge amounts of money, billions of pounds out of trading gas, and they exploit markets like this to spike prices. So those price spikes you see are just exaggerated because you've got market traders taking advantage of the situation. And this is really the problem, that when you leave people with a profit maximizing objective, purely a profit maximizing objective, loose on a market like this, you are going to get very crazy price spikes. And they're not thinking about the human impact of this. They're not thinking even about the broader economic impact of things. All they're trying to do is maximize their trading income. And indeed, a lot of them use artificial intelligence. So there's even machines trying to optimize that can also create huge spikes. So it's not even a human being in many cases making these decisions. So in these kind of markets, and that's generated huge profits. We talk a lot about the big energy firms, but actually, one thing that sometimes people forget is that actually Norway is making extraordinarily large amounts through its large stake in Equinor from any increase in gas prices. So, it's not just going to private companies, it's also actually going to the sovereign wealth fund. Now, the market moved in very similar ways to the gas market. So you also got these crazy spikes on the electricity pricing as well. And I think a lot of people were completely shocked by this. Now, why is that? Well, the starting point is that about half at that time of our electricity was generated by gas power stations. Now, not only are they dirty, as we know, in terms of pollution, but also they're very inefficient. So you lose about half of the gas to generate electricity. And the really surprising thing is that the way the electricity market works is to charge all the production at any moment in time at the highest cost generator. So that means, it's a bit like, all supermarkets charging at Waitrose prices. It's a really surprising way the market works, and I'll show you on the next chart how that looks. So this is a chart basically looking at price on the left-hand side, and then on the bottom it's the demand. So what you see at the bottom is that renewables, which is that green line at the bottom left, so wind and solar, are very low cost in general. They do vary in terms of when they were built, and they're getting increasingly cheap. But in general, they are the low cost option for producing electricity. And then you have other forms, for example, nuclear, at a higher cost. But what you'll notice is that the highest cost, and this is particularly true, obviously, when gas prices are spiked, is gas. And as I said before, about half of our electricity was generated, it's less now, but it's still very significant, by gas. So what's happening is that those really high gas prices are actually defining the price, not only of just the half that is generated that way, but in fact the whole market, so even the renewables. So that is why you had that crazy spike that's very similar to that crazy spike, because the gas prices are driving your electricity pricing. And there's been a fierce debate on how we should fix this. Now, it is partly being fixed in two ways. The first is that new renewables are actually given different contracts to the old ones, which means that the extra margin that's made, all that profit that's made from the difference between that low cost renewable and the high cost gas, with these new contracts called CFDs, that money is actually paid back into the kitty. So that's actually, for new contracts, a much better way of organizing it. And the second way, of course, is that what we're trying to do is expand that renewables capacity, because fundamentally, if we can have enough capacity to not use gas, at least most of the time, then that would bring all the cost of our electricity down significantly. So the situation will improve, but this is quite slow. We could change it through faster market reform, or we could rely on the acceleration of the renewables to basically drive out that really expensive and dirty gas. But that's going to take some time. I mean, realistically, we're talking 2030, not next year. So that was the wholesale pricing. Then, if you then look at how that impacted on the consumer pricing, you'll be familiar with all the debates about the new Ofgem price cap, and also the energy price guarantee. So just to recap that. So the price cap is the level Ofgem sets based on the increases in the wholesale prices we've looked at. So those spikes you saw on the previous charts obviously are reflected in the spike of these consumer prices. The red bit at the top of those charts is the bit that was cut off by the energy price guarantee. So we didn't have to pay those top bits because of the energy price guarantee at 2,500, which kept it that way. Now, I said we didn't have to pay for it. Well, we kind of did because that was paid for by the government, and that, of course, is public money. So we did pay for that. We just paid for it indirectly. The total increase in costs, we're talking of 67 billion, an enormous sum. So that price cap, so that peak level in the middle there, was quadruple the previous level. So over £4,000 compared to around 1,000 before. And then 40 billion came in subsidies from public funds. But as I said, that is public money. So that's our money as well. And then, because you're still paying double the amount, even with these government support. And the electricity, as you saw from that previous electricity chart, is incredibly high. And the high electricity price, which is basically 4 times gas, undermines decarbonisation, because people really are not keen on switching to heat pumps because they see the high cost of electricity and they think, well, it's going to cost me a fortune to run that heat pump. So even if we give people £7,500, as we are now, each to have a heat pump, basically paying for the heat pump for them, so a free heat pump, they don't want one because they are worried about the cost of running it, and electricity is 4 times more. So they're worried for a very good reason. So we have to fix that to help decarbonisation. So that's a consumer price story. So where did this 40 billion of public money go? So the government says they were incredibly generous giving it to us, but actually it's public money. That public money for the EPG, which is the energy price guarantee, the £2,500 that you'll remember, that went to the energy retailers, and that money then goes to the generators and producers, which they then paid out in shareholders to shareholders, as we'll see in a minute. And then the energy bill support scheme, you'll probably remember that £400 that we no longer get, but we did get last year, which was £66 a month. That's also public money. So it did go to households initially, but guess what? That then, of course, went off their bill. So that's again going to the energy retailers, who are then paying that money out to pay the inflated price of electricity and gas, which again generated big profits, which went to shareholders. And the winners, well, we've talked already about Equinor and Norwegians. Obviously, Shell BP is big suppliers of gas. Qatar, which is where the LNG is coming from. Centrica, obviously through the gas and also its power stations. EDF. EDF, interestingly, this is EDF UK that did nuclear power, and it was therefore getting those big windfall profits I talked about. Obviously, in France, it wasn't making any money because it was forced to sell at only a 4% increase. But in the UK, we just let that cap shoot up, and as a result, EDF UK made a lot of money. And then Scottish Power. Scottish Power made lots of money through its generation business in particular. So a whole range of winners, and fundamentally, we're the losers. We're losers in 2 ways, directly through the bills, and then the public money that also was used and ended up with these same people. And just some headlines. So you probably remember seeing some of these huge profit numbers, the 24 billion Equinor number, which actually is primarily, European focused, and then the more global numbers from Shell and BP, 32 billion, 23 billion. I mean, these are just eye-watering sums. Obviously, not all of those numbers are related to the UK market, and they don't give a breakdown of like how much they directly made out of us. But we've seen the numbers in aggregate. We are talking tens of billions in total for the UK. And then if you go down to just the UK focused businesses, obviously the numbers are a lot smaller, but they're still very big numbers. So Centrica tripled its profits to 3.2 billion in 2022. And this year, believe it or not, it's actually doing even better. It's made 6.5 billion just in the first half. And one of the reasons for that is that the one part of its business that made the least, which was actually their retail part, so the bit that does the billing, has been given more money by Ofgem, along with all the other energy firms. So actually, these energy firms that we buy directly from are having a bumper year. And they were probably making the least of all the players last year because the huge money was going to the gas producers, the electricity generators. But now they have got in on the action thanks to Ofgem, and they are making even more money than last year, believe it or not. Scottish Power, 1.6 billion last year. It's already made 2.2 billion in the first 9 months of this year. That last number was actually announced today. Just at the time that they're going to the courts to get court warrants to break into more homes to install prepayment meters. Would you believe it? So that's good old Scottish Power. EDF UK I've already talked about, so 1.1 billion last year when actually they weren't making any money in France. And in the first half of this year. And then SSE, even though they sold their retail business to OVO, they are still making 2.2 billion a year in the UK, being generated by these inflated energy prices. And, that's part of the story for why we need energy for all, because we need a system that actually reclaims those lost billions that we have seen. So we've got to restructure the way energy pricing happens to make sure that those billions are not flowing straight out of our pockets, either directly through our own money or indirectly through public funds to these energy companies. And we need to protect people from this volatility, this crazy volatility that you see can return and probably will return. We're already having some regional tensions, obviously, with the situation in Palestine, and there will always be other supply issues, demand issues. And the way that market is set up is you will get more energy spikes that will be exploited by energy traders with their AI algorithms, and we're going to get the same spikes in the future. So that's why we need a different energy system. We need to have a way of stopping people falling through the net and being unable to heat their homes. So that is why we need a new energy pricing system. So that's a really quick intro to it. Obviously, there's a lot more detail. This is very simplified, but hopefully it just gets everyone up to this kind of the same base level of understanding about what happened and how energy pricing is decided in the UK and why we need to change it. Please get in touch if you want to get more detail, get more reading, discuss any issues, give your points of view. Obviously, we're going to do some questions now as well. And please share the word, tell people, remind people how unfair this system is and the need for change. Please spread the word and support Energy for All. Thanks.
Jonathan, thank you very much. Thank you so much. That was very informative. It's staggering to hear the extent to which wholesale energy prices are removed, I guess, and from the prices consumers pay and really fall back on consumers. It's crazy. We're going to move into the second part of the session where I've got some questions for Jonathan to build on the presentation, and at the same time I'd love to have some input from the audience. I won't be able to monitor the chat at this time, so if you'd like to ask a question, please just raise your virtual hand. And yeah, for now, I'll just keep questions relevant to the current discussion. And yeah, and we'll open up discussion in a few minutes at the Q&A. But before we do that, before I ask a question, we had an immediate reaction from John Hanford on the presentation. John Hanford, I'm going to ask you to unmute now.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
Hi. Just want to a very interesting presentation, and I get all that about the way that the price structuring works and the price, etc. One thing which was mentioned, which I thought needs highlighting, is to do with heat pumps. It was mentioned that the cost of electricity puts people off. Well, it should be borne in mind that a heat pump is 4 times more efficient than a gas boiler, and that offsets that gas is sort of 3 or 4 times cheaper. What you usually end up with is at least breaking even, but usually making a bit of a saving with a heat pump. But the killer thing is if you get solar panels and a home battery installed as well. Obviously, that costs money, but if you do that, then your solar panels will drive the heat pump, and you get rid of gas. And this is the big thing. If the government could fund that for people, that would be really good, because you can save about 75% of your energy, solar panels, battery, and a heat pump, because it makes the maximum use of your solar panels. Your solar panels will generate 20% return on investment per year, so they pay for themselves in 5 years if you can use the electricity efficiently. And you can get a heat pump in some circumstances installed free with a £7,500 grant you can get if you've got big enough radiators. Obviously, if you've got to install a hot water tank, you need your radiators changing, it might cost you a bit more. But effectively, you can have a system. The other way of looking at it is that the money you spend on a gas boiler over the next 10 years to run it could pay for solar panels, a heat pump, and a battery. And at the end of that, it'll pay for itself again in the next 10 years. Whereas if you kept your gas boiler going for 10 years, you'd have nothing to show for it at the end of it, and be doomed to paying another 10 years because you've spent all the money that you could have spent on solar panels and a heat pump and battery, etc., on gas instead. So the government should be funding that. It's a no-brainer. It pays for itself. That's what the country should be doing, and it reduces the domestic gas demand to right down, and makes us all it saves the planet. We're reducing carbon. So that's my input. I'd like to anyway. There you go. So,
yeah, I mean, some really good points there. Completely agree. We definitely want to get people off gas. I think I have always have a slight worry that what we don't want to do is rely on the great efficiency of heat pumps to excuse high electricity pricing, because you're right, it kind of almost disguises that problem by having a 3 to 4 times efficiency. But we shouldn't be paying 4 times more for our electricity. So I think, in parallel with switching people to heat pumps, what we've got to do is we've got to drive gas out of our grid. That's really, really important, because that's what fundamentally will bring in electricity pricing down. And then you'll have really, really, really cheap pricing coming off heat pumps using the heat pump efficiency. It's interesting you're talking about the combination, because actually Octopus have this pilot project of zero bill homes, where basically they are put housing, and the offer is you get a zero bill. So it's kind of energy for all, but on your entire usage. So definitely the combination is good. I think one of the problems we've got is that the peak demand for the UK is obviously winter evenings. And that's why we need to get wind capacity up to drive to support that evening peak. Solar is obviously great during the day. Will be good for topping up people's batteries for their EVs, all that kind of stuff. It works really well for that. But we will need to really focus on also getting gas out of our grid. So gas out of our homes, yes, but gas out of our grid is what's going to drive. Really, thanks for the input there. It's really good to remind people of that, and hopefully we'll encourage people to get behind electricity as much as possible. But the government will help us by, you know, reforming the market to make electricity more affordable.
Thank you, Jonathan, for responding to that. I'm going to move on a little bit.
Amal, do you want to take the next question?
Because we're running short of time. So I'm going to move the conversation on away from the heat pumps. And but yeah, as I said earlier, there'll be more space for everyone in the Q&A at the end. Jonathan, in your presentation, you mostly talked about the wholesale price of gas impacting the increased energy pricing. But what about the rest?
Yeah, so very good question. By the wholesale part, because that's really what has happened in the last couple of years with the huge increase in wholesale. So that's fundamentally driven the pricing up. But obviously there are other parts of the cost bar for energy. And one obvious thing is obviously the cost of the grid. That cost is significant. It will actually be going up over time, and it does raise because obviously there are so whilst they're not such crazy numbers, significant amount, and importantly, the way the grid is organized needs to better support the overall objectives of our energy system, as opposed to profit maximization of costs are significant and important to manage going forwards. One of the we are paying for. So you remember just at the beginning of the companies in general, competition policy, a lot of them went bust. And that left us with a huge bill of about 3 billion, which we are paying for through our standing charge every day, in fact, every day or every month, from Ofgem's complete failure to regulate and check the viability of these companies that set up. So they spent a load of money and went bust and left us with the bill. Thanks very much. Other costs that go on to standing charges include marketing costs, sponsorship charge, every month. We shouldn't be very unfair, because you have to pay for that before you actually get any energy at all. So about £300 a year now. So as these other costs have gone up, like the failed company bill of 3 billion, that's pushed standing charges up. So it's our campaigns is about getting rid at the moment, which is fantastic.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Any more questions?
Thanks, Jonathan. Yeah. Yeah, so you spoke about the standing charges, the standing charge rising for a couple of reasons. And what are the implications for people, for consumers, the standing charge going up?
the people basically who have low income try and cut their consumption so that they can pay their like £300. So it's, you know, the parallel I think about is just imagine if we had to pay £300 before we could buy any food. I mean, we would just not accept that. And I don't see why we should be accepting that for energy either. It's an unfair structure. Lots of businesses have fixed costs, but they don't hit you with a £300 bill before they let you into their supermarket. So we shouldn't hit people with that bill before we let them get any energy. It hits the people who could afford it least the most. And it's probably one of the most cruel parts, really, of our energy system.
Oh, thanks, Jonathan. We actually have a couple of questions relating to Ofgem, so maybe I'm going to come to that quickly. First, we have one from Fran, I think, who's had, oh, not Fran, sorry. Yes, from Fran, who I'm gonna let Fran ask that question, and then Ruth had a comment as well on Ofgem, saying if profits are going so much, if profits are going so much this year, how did Ofgem manage to put such high caps? So keep that in mind. And I'm gonna go to Fran. Fran, are you able to unmute yourself?
Hi, Fran.
Hiya. I'm just trying to see.
Oh, there we go. Fran, back to you. Oh, I think.
Hi, Fran.
Oh, no, here we go.
Not working. It says, oh, right. Okay, sorry. I was trying
I can
to
hear you.
unmute myself.
Far away.
Okay, thank you.
No, you're good.
Yeah, I was just, I just don't understand how Ofgem is supposed to be working for us and seems to be working for everybody else but the consumer. And I don't understand why. And if I understand it, what you've said, why they use the highest cost, because that's just racketeering, surely, isn't it not?
Well, let me take the second bit first. So what you're talking about is the way that electricity is priced. So that market design, there's been lots and lots of debate about the market design. People that hear the low cost suppliers, the highest price. So basically, you know, the Aldi Waitrose example, it does seem absolutely crazy. And the idea behind it was that they were trying to make sure that we have enough energy at any moment in time. So there's big worry about there's going to be potentially a blackout. And that's being used to say, okay, we need to offer people the ability to have high cost when we need it. But unfortunately, what's happened is instead of those high cost options being used in just the emergency situations, they've ended up driving the market about 80% of the time. So the system should be that is like an emergency option. Now, what we've are some power stations who have deliberately manipulated the market, and actually some of them have been caught at this and fined, actually by Ofgem, to give them credit. They do eventually sometimes. So actually what some power stations have been doing is actually deliberately switching off when we most need the energy, to then drive bigger bids and higher prices this is the problem when you set up a market where people are given one objective, which is to maximize profits. They will play the game, and that's exactly what's happened. So there are all sorts of ridiculous games going on to try and drive up the price, and there are a lot of people that want to change that market design. The government consulted about it, but it decided it was too difficult to solve, and it's left it for Labour to sort out. So what was supposed to be happening now has been delayed until after the election in terms of changing that. The general question about Ofgem, and I can probably cover off Ruth's question at the same time, is that the reason that the companies are making even more profit this year is that they persuaded Ofgem that actually they'd missed out on some profit last year, partly I think because the retailers were looking at the generators and at the gas producers and thinking, well, they made extraordinary profits last year, but we didn't, because we were having to buy that expensive gas and electricity to supply. So they feel like they missed out. So they persuaded Ofgem, despite all the organizations like us saying, no, that is completely ridiculous, to actually give them more profit this year to make up for last year. So this is just an example. And Ofgem's justification for this was that they said, well, do you remember at the beginning of the crisis, all those companies went bust, those little companies that we failed to with the 3 billion bill, we don't want who consumers are paying for. We don't want that to happen again. And so we want to make sure that all the companies left are making low bills to make sure that the companies that are already making lots of money make even more money to make sure they don't go bust. That was basically the argument that Ofgem gave, and they did it with a straight face. It is quite extraordinary. They're clearly not fit for purpose. People who end up in the industry, it's your classic situation of the regulator being captured by the industry, and it's a big problem for the UK. I hope that covers those questions on Ofgem.
Thanks, Jonathan. Thank you very much. I think something that people are probably a big question that people probably got on their minds everywhere really is, will energy now be expensive forever? Is there any end in sight, or any prospect that energy prices will be going back down?
Well, as we have seen, the prices now have settled around, using the basic average, around the £2,000 mark. Slightly down from the 2,500, but nowhere near the 1,000 they were in 2020. So are they going to stay high like they are now? They will stay at this kind of level until 2030. And there, of course, can be fluctuations along the way, but on average, that is the expectation. Part of the reason for that is until we drive that gas portion out of our energy supply, so that 40% coming from gas, we need to replace that with renewables, and we need a lot of more renewables to do that. So that's going to take time. So that's why people are talking about the timescale being 2030. Now, obviously, what we can do to deal with that interim period and make sure that people can afford energy between now and 2030 is change the energy pricing system. For example, energy for all, that would then make sure that could still happen within the existing structured renewables to provide essential energy. Those low cost renewables provide the essential energy, but excess usage will be charged at a higher rate, and that to the grid to pay for the excess usage. So the people that are using huge amounts in if you just look at the top 10% essentially of the income level, that really So they'll be paying more for their energy, and rule that actually fundamentally energy is going to be expensive until at least 2030 and potentially beyond.
Thanks,
Any other
Jonathan.
questions?
Yeah, we have a question from William, who's been waiting for a little while. I'm going to bring you in, William.
Hi, William.
Hi. Yeah, it's over issues you've been exposed, talking very eloquently about within the energy system. That it needs major reform, major change, and that feels like primary legislation. And possibly an overhaul of a regulatory structure, the way systems set. So I just wondered if you could say a little bit about how you see changes that need changing to, achieve a sort of energy for all type demand.
Yeah, really good question. I mean, the reform of the electricity market was actually supposed to be happening right now, as I mentioned. So we were part of the consultation process, as were a number of other organisations, but essentially it's been put into the too difficult bucket by government. So that could have happened now, and we could be, planning a fairer electricity market right now. But that will be delayed by, there was an opportunity. I mean, interesting enough, the energy bill actually went into law today, as proudly announced by Claire Coutinho on her Twitter or X feed. But it's more, for example, a ban on prepaid happened in terms of reforms. So those things will now obviously happen with the new government in place. So it's going to take years. I mean, Labour are at the moment saying that restructuring the energy pricing system is actually not the first thing they're going to do when they get into power. Already working with them in opposition. Gem that could do some standing charges themselves, because of it really hard for energy firms to do that. So Ofgem, I think Ofgem needs completely reforming. It's clearly a broken regulator, and so it would be to also reform the way Ofgem work. But so part of it's government, and a lot of it's about public pressure. So what we've really got to do is keep up the public pressure. Writing to your MPs, talking to other people about it, building up more and more pressure, so that when Labour gets into power, it feels that actually this needs to be really high on their list of things to crack quickly, rather than moved to a later stage. Obviously, they're talking about GB energy and other initiatives on retrofitting homes. All these things are very important, but an early task rather than something they delay for a couple of years. Hope that covers it off. Does that work as an answer, William?
Thanks, Jonathan. I think we also had a comment from Terry Tonks, who couldn't find the hand earlier. Terry, do you wanna come in? if I can find you. There we go.
Hi, Jerry.
Hi, yeah. Well, a number of things really. I won't deal with the heat pump issue, as you know that. I wanted actually to talk about the energy for all, because if you look at the manifesto, I mean, one of the problems we have, with the fact that we need to insulate all the houses, is we don't have the resources, the people to do that work.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the things in there, I mean, it's a bit like the 2019 Labour manifesto. Everything in it was good, but it was never going to be completed in one term. If this had been phased to show how it was going to be achieved, because it's suggesting you can do this and this and this and this and this and this all at the same time, and that's not practical. And I would, and electricity, etc., for us all, and to get a more rational pricing structure in the market, we're going to do things in time. So obviously, for me, getting rid of the standing charges first is critical. I'd also like to see a lower price for the initial number of units. That, to me, is going to be less threatening and frightening for the power companies than than the upfront proposal of give it away for free, because they're all going to be sitting there thinking, God, how on earth are we going to make any money? So I think there needs to be, if we want to achieve it, there's nothing wrong with the manifesto per se, but we need to have a staged approach to how we're going to get there.
Yeah, some really good points there. I think it's definitely true that different parts of the manifesto will happen over different timescales. So, we're all very aware that the retrofit job for the UK is absolutely huge. Not helped by the fact we've been continuing to build houses that aren't actually up to, good standards, which that should have probably been the first thing we should have done, is made sure we're not making any more houses that will need retrofitting later. So it's going to be an absolutely massive job. Completely agree. There's not enough people to do it. It's going to be expensive. It's going to take time. That's going to take many years. Timescales, people are talking, 5-10 years to get that done. As you say, some things can be done much quicker. So getting rid of the standing charge is definitely one of the quickest things you could do, as is banning forced installs of prepayment meters. So there are some, at the moment, for example, focusing on those two things because we think those can happen quickly. Other things will definitely take time. We'd need to build up the workforce of people that will do retrofits and heat pump installs. Obviously, there's a lot of talk about it, but there needs to be a lot more action to build up that workforce. It's very labor intensive. I mean, even fitting a heat pump itself is a lot more labor intensive than fitting a boiler. The number of man days involved. So, installation retrofit, depending on the type of job, can also be quite labor intensive. So definitely a lot of training, and it will take time. But we should push for those things we can do quickly and try and get those to happen.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Hope that helps explain a bit.
I'm gonna bring Ruth in, who's got a question, and very quickly, we're coming to the end of the hour, but please do stick around if you're able. We can keep the conversation going, and we also have some updates on the next session and a few other things from FPA before everyone goes. But I'm gonna bring Ruth in right now.
Yes, I do have a question, but before, I'd just like to respond to Rachel Luke, who posted about people in communal billing situations, which is something that we've worked people in what's called district heating, which is like central heating, but for a whole building or a whole estate. People in those situations often get left out of any government plans and considerations, and it's going to be down to us, I'm afraid, Rachel, you, me, others, to make sure that that doesn't happen as we move to a fairer system like Energy for All. And in answer to the question of energy companies not wanting to do it because how are they going to give all that free energy? The money will come from a lot of it will come from windfall taxes and ending subsidies on the fossil fuel giants and from higher prices. So it's not necessarily just going to come from inside the budget of the energy companies. But Jonathan, I don't want to put you on the spot with a load of figures, but I can never keep them in my head. And I think you probably have them a bit better in yours. We're talking about billions, right? And when they say that things can't be done, they usually mean, well, there just isn't the money for it. And I think one problem that we all have is that we don't know how much money there really is. And people, a lot of us have a lot of trouble getting our heads around the difference between a billion and a million.
Yeah.
And they're very different. And some of those figures with all the zeros don't mean that much to us. But when you actually look at the subsidies that they're giving to North Sea oil, when you look at the profit figures, a lot of things that seemed impossible seem possible. It doesn't mean that they can be quick because people have to be trained, and we have a workforce in this country that's been deprived of skills for a very long time, and it takes a while before people get that up again. But do you have any figures you can give us about what money is actually available to do what we want, to make sure that everybody can get has enough energy to cover our basic needs, for example?
Yeah, so there's two ways of thinking about it. One is the pots of money, and one is actually what the genuine cost of that energy actually is. So we're already aware, obviously, there's windfall taxes. Those windfall taxes have raised less money than we had hoped because, unsurprisingly, energy firms have exploited the loopholes that the government put in there that we fought to not allow. But if you were to close those windfalls, it would actually easily fund that free essential energy, depending on how you cost what that energy is actually, the price of that energy. So if you remember the graph, looking at what is the cost of, for example, free electricity that we would supply to people, that would depend on whether you're pricing at the price of that initial 50% of our supply that is very cheap to supply, or whether you're pricing it at the price of the very expensive gas. So it's not just the pot of money that we're allocating from windfall taxes. You've also got to think about what's actually the genuine price of the free energy you're giving. So if you were to consider it in the way of renewables costs, then the cost of free essential energy is actually incredibly low. I mean, we are talking a few £100s. Obviously, if you are factoring at the highest gas cost, then that then requires taxes, so closing all those loopholes we talked about. But a lot of work's been done on the affordability, and there is enough money. This is excluding the cost of installation, etc. So this is just the fundamental giving everyone essential energy to keep their heat on and keep their lights on. So that is affordable within the current cost structure. Now, the question about whether the energy retailers would feel they can afford to do this or would support it, well, it depends on whether those businesses are making money out of the other side of the business. So, for example, Centrica wouldn't be very keen on the idea because it's taking money from part of Centrica to reduce the cost of British gas bills. So they're not going to be that attracted by it, particularly because they're making, as we've said earlier, huge amounts of money right now. But those retailers that are not making loads of windfall profits from gas or from inflated electricity prices, for them, it's a great idea because essentially it would solve debt problems, it would solve fuel poverty. So those kind of companies are very much in support. It's those other companies of the Centrica ilk that would be very much against this, and obviously the big losers will be the gas suppliers who will pay more windfall taxes. So the BP Shells and indeed Equinor. Equinor obviously makes absolutely extraordinary amounts of money, which is building up money in Norway, but it's coming out of bills in the UK. So there is the bottom line is there is the money.
Thanks, Jonathan. Ruth, I hope that answers your question. We had a question from Helen in the chat, asking about if FPA is planning on paying or organising a solicitor appointment for a possible class action lawsuit to claim back the interest on credits on utility customer accounts.
Yeah, so this is a really interesting question. So one of the complaints people have is that energy firms are very good at building up balances in people's accounts. So those people that pay on direct debit, which does make some sense for people in general, because it enables you to pay the same amount every month, so you don't get hit with big bills over winter. It averages it out. But energy firms are very good at overestimating bigger balances for interest. And indeed, one of the reasons why some of those companies, who are very poorly financed, were able to get going is they were using excess balances from customer accounts. So it's definitely a bad practice. Ofgem's done again a very poor job at clamping down on this. To challenge that through whatever means is effective. So definitely interesting idea from Helen is force change that way, which is definitely an interesting angle to explore.
Thanks, Jonathan. I've got another quick one from someone in the chat from Fran.
Any more questions in the chat or elsewhere?
Yeah, Fran is asking, what about QE, which I guess is quantitative easing for public good, not just bankers' profits? Is that something you think you can answer to?
Yep. That a lot of the QE that's happened has ended up just inflating assets like shares and property, making it even more unaffordable, and huge profits from shares from QE. So yes, we should be using that money to build the infrastructure that we're talking about. So, we're talking earlier about insulation. We should be investing in things like that. So yeah, totally agree with that.
Thanks, Jonathan. And we've got
Any more questions, Amar?
John Hanford, who asked a question earlier, who's got another one who's got his hand up. I'm going to bring John Hanford in.
Hi. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
I'm unmuted.
Yeah,
brilliant. Just a quick one. Something I came across talking to a house builder. He does sort of low cost housing, community housing, that sort of thing. Anyway, but he was saying that there is no incentive for the builder to install energy efficient heating. That there is a legal requirement for insulation to install a bog standard gas boiler, because all the profit from like putting a heat pump in, solar panels, etc., goes to the house builder. The cheapest thing is a gas boiler, and it's then for the house buyer to decide whether they want to put up with that or invest in changing it. So it should be a legal requirement for builders to install energy efficient heating systems, and that will sort a lot of people out in the future.
100% agree. I mean, that's absolute insanity, because it's not just that you're then ripping out a gas boiler. you're potentially having to, change piping, change radiators, other things. I mean, the waste of material, time, money is just extraordinary. Yeah, that should not be allowed. I totally agree that it should be legally prevented. That's just madness. Any other questions, Amal? Any more?
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. I'm gonna bring Terry in for one last question, and then because we've gone obviously a little bit over time, I'm gonna close the session, and maybe if another question comes around, we can answer it. Terry, it's up to you. Up to you. Oh.
You there, Terry?
It was blocking you. It was you were blocking it. So
Got you now.
Was the EPC problem, which is because the EPC isn't based on CO2, it's based on cost. So if gas is cheaper than the electricity, so for example, I had my house potentially re-rated because I'm trying to get a heat pump in Bristol. I live in Bristol. 12 months to get planning permission. That's absolutely ludicrous. But so I've got an E rating at the moment, verging on a D. If I put the heat pump in, guess where I go? F. Yeah. It's ludicrous. We've got to get something done to get the whole issue around EPC sorted out as well. Otherwise, people aren't going to want to do it. Builders aren't going to want to do it if it's going to make the ratings of their houses lower. It's bonkers.
Yeah, I mean, it is bonkers. I've got two answers to that. One is, yes, we need to fix EPCs. The other is we also need to fix the price of electricity. Because that's actually...
I absolutely agree with that one.
Yeah, so there's two problems there that we need to fix. Any more, Amal?
Thanks a lot, Terry. No more that I could see. Does anyone have any a final question they want to bring in before I close the session? Yes, William.
Hi, William.
Hi. Yeah, I just wondered what your thoughts are. I think people have been suggesting that you separate out the renewable market from the overall gas market, and allocate that sort of power to low-income households, so that you don't have this problem of it being paid to the gas price and so on. And I think that's even been looked at an EU level as well.
Yeah,
I just wonder what your thoughts
it has been. I mean, there've been various proposals along these lines, one being the green power pool idea, which was very much along those lines. So those cheap renewables being allocated to homes in fuel poverty, essentially, so that they get the low cost energy in parallel, working on getting more of that low cost energy, so that pool increases and eventually becomes for everyone. So yeah, there's been various proposals along those lines. That was one of the directions that was being explored for the reform of the electricity market that was supposed to be happening now. That's now been delayed.
Thanks, Jonathan. Very quickly, we've got a question from Fran about nationalization, to which maybe I might just say that we plan on having a fuel for thought session about this, but maybe you have just a few words for Fran.
Hi there.
That's it. It's just the question is just how about nationalization?
Yeah, so as you said, there's another session planned on that. That's a huge issue in itself. the ownership of the grid, both from the money that's being pulled out in share payments, but also about actually better managing our grid infrastructure. So a big question about, the ownership of that. Obviously, we've got GB Energy as a proposal from Labour coming through, which to me seems like a step in the right direction, but a very small step. We need something much more fundamental than that. So yeah, that's a really interesting topic. The private model has clearly failed. The question is, how do we get from where we are today to where we want to be? That's the big challenge. I think most people now accept that the privatization route taken has failed, and they see a lot of the problems with the current system. The question is how we move from where we are today, which is a very bad place, to where we need to get to. And yes, so please keep an eye out for that session on nationalisation. I think it will be a very interesting discussion.
Ruth, some final words before I close?
Any more, Amal?
Hi. Yes, maybe this is your closing, Amal, but I wanted to ask about what's planned in terms of mobilizing against the prepayment meters now, and for Energy for All this winter.
Yes, thanks for asking, Ruth.
Do you want me to?
I'm gonna just post a little thing in the chat with some things that Fuel Poverty Action has got planned between now and the next educational session. There's a digital day of action against fuel poverty, which is taking place online all day on the 3rd of November. There's a vigil against winter deaths and a march against Ofgem in Glasgow on the 4th of November at 5 p.m. And there's also a campaign launch, Unite for Energy for All campaign launch, which is taking place online on the 6th of November at 6:30 p.m. You've got the links there in the chat. Jonathan, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, so as you probably gathered from what Amal's just said, a lot of this stuff is actually really immediate. So please, can you look at the information, Digital Day of Action and the other things we're doing, because it's got any time and energy to help out. It will be brilliant to get your support. Please share the web with others. Tell them about what we're doing. Both prepayment meters and standing charges are very imminent now. As I mentioned earlier, Scottish Power went to court last week getting new warrants to break into people's homes right at the start of winter. I mean, unbelievable. We've actually raised this already. It's been raised in Parliament this week. Letters have been written to Scottish Power demanding a response back to Parliament. So we're putting pressure on Scottish Power, we're putting pressure on Ofgem, but we need your help. The more people that write, the more people that get involved with this Digital Day of Action. Please take action now, because now is really the key time.
Thanks a lot, Jonathan. And a few final words, I'm going to speak to the next Fuel for Thought session, which is called Heat and Light Are Basic Rights, which is one of Fuel Poverty Action's slogans that we like. Heat and Light Basic Rights is a learning session on energy prepayment meters, experiencing disconnection, and learning from the win to ban prepayment meters for water. Heat and Light Basic Rights will be held at 6:30 p.m. on the 16th of November, where we'll be hearing from people with lived experience of PPMs and the work being done to fight back. I'm also going to drop a little link in the chat where you can already RSVP to that event. Ruth, do you want to come in?
Yeah, can I just add on that? It'd be great if you could help publicize, because this session's been really great, but there's too few people here, and we need a lot more people to get the benefit of a lot of thinking that's been done this time by Amal and Jonathan, but next time there'll be other people as well. Also, I agree with Jonathan, the most important thing is the immediate events coming up, but at the beginning of December, what is it, the 3rd and 4th, or the 2nd and 3rd, there's going to be warm-ups which is based on the idea that if you can't afford to heat your home, we have a right to go into any public building together and hold a speak out or give out leaflets or have a picnic or whatever we want to do collectively. And they're very effective. And we've held warm-ups in places ranging from a bank, a local shopping centre, a library, and the lobby of the House of Commons. And this time, people are going to be doing it at, I think, a lot of energy-focused targets as well. And it's a lot of fun. And who knows if anything's arrestable these days? You can be arrested for holding up a sign saying Gaza. But as things go, going into a warm place to keep warm with your friends is not a highly arrestable thing to do. And that's going to be organised. There'll be towns and cities all over the UK doing it. So please have a look at our Energy for All website and get the information on how you can get involved in that. That's my last lot.
Thank you very much for that, Ruth. I'm going to take a quick screen grab as we say goodbye. You can also all unmute yourselves and say goodbye. Yes, switch your cameras on, give us a wave, and yeah, hope to see you next time on the 16th of November. Thanks everyone for coming and for your contributions and questions.
Thanks everyone.